Coming to you live from the city of Port Phillip. Welcome to Marcus Pearl Live. And tonight we're in the post-election period. So thank you so much for your support over the past 8 weeks as Andrew and Greg and myself did our best to give you some unbiased, biased commentary on what was happening with the City of Port Phillip Council election. It received literally over 10,000 views, and it certainly shows that there's a lot of untapped news demand out there for local content on council. And that's what this show is all about. So we've decided to continue it in live form. Feel free to join us here on Facebook or on YouTube. Please submit any questions you've got to hello@marcuspearl.com. But we've decided to continue based on this format to give you a insight into what's happening in your local area and what your local agenda actually is. So I'm joined again by Greg and Andrew Bond. There's been a busy few weeks since the council has been inaugurated. They went behind the scenes for 2 or 3 days, and they, behind the scenes, elected a mayor and deputy mayor, which was contested. Louise Crawford came out victorious for mayor. It's publicly known that Serge Taman also ran for mayor. We don't know what the votes were. So the situation was that councillors met behind the scenes with a paid facilitator. They took a blind vote. So not even the councillors, I'm aware, understand what the votes were. So Serge Taman was not victorious. Louise Crawford was elected as mayor, and Brian Mayers from the ratepayers of Port Phillip was elected as deputy mayor, which was contested against Heather Consolo, which has been confirmed by her public statements on Facebook. Greg and Andrew, welcome. Andrew, what's your first reaction to the mayor and deputy result?
I wasn't that surprised to see Louise get the mayoral robes. It was a matter of whether anyone else would do a deal to seal the mayor for themselves. I just don't think the new councillors knew each other well enough for any of them to be able to commit to each other for someone to take that away from Louise. Was a little surprised that Heather didn't get the deputy mayor role, given she did such a great job as mayor for the last 2 years. But that's what happens when you get 9 people in a room. No one knows how the vote's going to go.
And Greg, many people are saying in the community that the vote was for change. There are 7 new councillors. 3 of the 5 incumbents weren't returned. The community was looking for change, and it looks like they've got more of the same. What do you think?
Well, I asked Louise about this in the interview that you can see on Twisk, and she basically said it was decided by who wanted it, and she was interested, as was Brian. So it was easy for people like Alex, a newcomer, to put together a deal to do that kind of sharing across the spectrum, and it made sense to them. So I think it was contested, but with a small c.
And I think they're looking for some continuity here, but also a balance. There's a clear left. Louise Crawford is a member of the ALP, endorsed ALP councillor, and obviously Brian Mayers is one of the 3 ratepayers of Port Phillip councillors. So congratulations to Louise and Brian, and we're looking forward to getting them back on the program. Brian's been asked a number of times to come on the program. He's away on holiday at the moment, but he said he'll do his best to join us at some point in the future. Gentlemen, there's been a number of big issues in the city of Port Phillip over the past 3 or 4 weeks. The first one comes in a small package, but it's very important. Those little penguins in St Kilda, obviously. But Greg, give us the update of what's happened with this story. The St Kilda Pier, the $53 million redevelopment of St Kilda Pier, was meant to open last weekend. And I understand that the minister responsible for the project ended up cancelling the opening of the pier. Give us the background here, Greg.
Well, I think we have to use measured language. That they promised it would be open by the end of spring, which happened to be last Saturday. And the people who work on the pier were briefed to get it ready for an opening. So they're busy doing that on Friday. And we're about to meet the people from Earthcare to talk about the penguins. And they were contacted on the Thursday to say that they were going to get a nod to organise the visitation to the Penguin platform. So, they quite rightly assumed that was the getting ready for launch, because that's what you do to do that. And then, we're about to talk to a guest and we'll go through some of the itty-gritty with that. But it's obviously, I don't think it would be wrong to call it a fiasco, and no one's talking about it. The two possible ministers aren't talking about it. They're not responding to questions. So I think it's worth...
And the council doesn't want to know about it either in terms of... They're not talking about it either. Andrew, give us the backdrop story of the Penguins here in terms of who the competing parties are here.
The two parties are Earthcare and St Kilda, and then the Phillip Island Penguin Management. One of the two of them was going to be given the rights to run the Penguins in St Kilda, the Penguin viewing occasion, whatever they're going to do with it. This came to a council meeting earlier this year. It was a notice of motion put up for us to support the Earthcare and St Kilda as the people who would be to manage this. And I think Heather Consolo put up a motion for council to write a letter to the state government supporting Earthcare St Kilda, and that motion lost 5-4. It would have happened very late in a meeting, and it was a motion brought at the last minute, so it would have got very, very little attention. And I think it was a 5-4 vote on council. Very strange. I thought it would be 9-0, but it was 5-4 against supporting Earthcare. And I think it was myself, Tim Baxter, Heather Consolo, who put the motion up, and Christina Sirikoff were the four councillors who voted to support Earthcare, and the other five councillors, including yourself, Marcus, didn't vote to support Earthcare. And it was probably the only time Tim, Christina, Heather and I ever voted for the same motion, in favour of the same motion at any point in time. It was quite a strange combination to get down there and vote in favour of Earthcare, even though the motion lost.
So are you blushing, Marcus? We can't hear you, Marcus. You're muted.
You're on mute, Marcus.
You're muted.
Oh, sorry. Good thing. I'll explain myself in just a minute. But what we can say is that we had two competing parties to look after the Penguins or show tours there. It's been announced that there'll be a fee for that tour, which has caused significant backlash in the community, and that Earthcare have not been successful in that tender process, and it's been selected, effectively their competitor has been selected in the Phillip Island Penguin group to take it at a significant cost.
The little twist there, Marcus, is that we weren't aware of when we voted in the council chamber was that the current CEO of Parks Victoria was the former CEO of the Phillip Island Penguin Management. That wasn't brought to anyone's attention. So one may say there may have been a conflict of interest there, and maybe he did declare a conflict of interest and excuse himself from all decision making with regard to this. We don't know what that was, but as of last week, that person is no longer the CEO of Parks Victoria.
Well, I think now is as good a time as any to welcome Flossie. Welcome, Flossie. How are you? So, Flossie, you are the Vice President of Earthcare St Kilda. Welcome to the show.
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me.
No,
and actually, can I just jump in and say already, sorry, that it actually wasn't really a tender process. So we would have liked this to have gone out for expressions of interest for different groups to weigh in on how they would like to manage it. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. So the Environment Minister went into direct negotiation or signed off on Parks Victoria to go into direct negotiation with Phillip Island without us knowing anything about that until it was already done. And then we came in at the negotiation phase and we didn't really like the proposal that was being put forward by Phillip Island. So we were working with the Parks Victoria commercial team to have our own option put forward at the same time to the minister, but it wasn't a proper sort of tender or expression of interest process.
That's great. So how do you feel about what's happened? How do you feel about the process? And what are your members saying about what the state government's done here?
We don't feel great overall about how things have gone, unfortunately. I think that we would have really liked it to be an expression of interest, given that we are the community group who's been working in the colony for the last 35 years. And often when things go to direct negotiation, it's because there is already a group working there, and it's in the community's best interest to let them keep doing what they're doing. But in this situation, it was direct negotiation away from the community group that was already in the colony. So we were a bit disappointed about that. But once that happened and we got over it, we thought, okay, let's move on. Let's work with Phillip Island. Let's get an outcome that's good for the penguins and for the community. And then we just didn't really feel like that was going to happen because we weren't comfortable with the price that was being proposed. And we also weren't comfortable with the involvement that volunteers were going to have. So it's really important to us that volunteers remain a part of the program because, volunteers are the lifeblood of our community. They do so much for us. They provided such a great aspect of the penguin viewing experience. On a bad day, you could go there and only see 2 penguins. But no matter what, you're going to find a community volunteer there with a smile ready to tell you all about the penguins that they know and love. And so you're still going to have a great time no matter what. And we want them to be a part of the program in the future. And it wasn't really looking like that was going to be the case with Phillip Island.
Flossie, got a lot of media coverage during the week. How do you think the community feels about this, and what do you think most people want to see have happen, and what outcome are you looking for before we go to Greg to ask you a question?
Yeah, so we, before this kind of all blew up, we put out a survey to the community and we got 900 respondents. Basically about 80% of everyone would be pretty upset if it cost more than $10. So most people wanted it to remain under $10. So we expected all of them are pretty upset about this. And then also once that was announced, we then did a call out for people to write a letter to the Environment Minister, and very quickly we got quite a lot of respondents. I'm not sure what the most recent numbers are. I think we might be at 700, possibly more. So yeah, people want it to be cheap and they want it to remain local. So yeah, I think people were pretty upset about that decision.
Go ahead, Greg.
Well, it's interesting in that the Age reported that they're going to change the fee from the rumoured $24 down to $0. Now, I'm interested, Flossie, because you did propose a 0 fee option, but they told you that was too expensive for them. So
yeah,
what's changed, do you think?
Yeah, so 3 options went to the minister. One was Phillip Island's option, one was an Earth Care and Parks Victoria option, and then one was also the Parks Victoria and Earth Care option, but the government would subsidise the price. And that they selected Phillip Island. As far as we know, there was no changes to the and then over the weekend, after it received a bit of media attention, that was when we were told that it was going to be free, and so therefore that means the government must be subsidising it. How much it's going to cost them to do that, not sure, but what we do know is that ours is the cheapest option. So
So Flossie, I'm not critical of you in this, but it smells fishy to me in that if the minister was going to make it free, I thought there were press release would come spilling out faster than a flood of penguins at a sea full of sardines. So, but they haven't made any comments. Has the minister specifically said there'd be no charge?
Yes, the minister's office has spoken to us and told me directly that there will be no charge. I don't know how long for. I don't know if that's just for the next 12 months or if that's ongoing. But we have been told it will be free.
And have they told you when they're opening the pier, Flossie?
Yes.
And when's that?
I think this can be public, but
can be now.
just do it. Let's go.
Go for it, Flossie.
There's a private invitation, so stakeholders will be walking down the pier with Nina Taylor this weekend, And then my understanding is that it will be open after that.
Fantastic.
Right.
Now,
Okay.
Marcus has got a penguin suit. So,
Absolutely. I think we should all get down there. Hey, Flossie, the world's a better place for you being in it. So thank you for joining us here tonight.
No worries. My pleasure.
And thanks for adding some facts too, Flossie.
Absolutely. It's good to get that on the public record also. Gentlemen, let's keep moving, if we could, from penguins to the St Kilda encampment that's been happening at the Jackson Street car park. Who wants to take the lead on this one for us?
Well, I have to do that first so Andrew can slip in, because I'm going to say my question in Twist was, why has this been let to go on for 7 weeks? So it's a encampment in a Jackson Street car park, taking up 4 or 5 spots, multiple tents, 24/7 antisocial behaviour. 7 weeks it's been going on. It's been driving the locals nuts.
So just for some background also, it put in place just before the council went into caretaker. For pretty much the entirety of the caretaker period, the encampment was in the council-owned car park, which was some structures implemented there. And then pretty much the first week of the new council being in place, there was a notice to clear out by council and police that the camp was cleared. A mobile CCTV unit was placed on site and a hurricane fence was placed around some of the car parks in there. Then the group that was camped there, some of them have moved or returned to Fitzroy Street.
Or Little Grey Street. Yeah. So they do, it's just moved around the corner. So it's not a solution. But the thing is, as council was told, local laws officers went there every day. The police went there multiple times, yet nothing was able to happen. And I think this is what's exasperated the locals. And we had people, I think we might have a segment to play of one of the locals' testimonies, that this is someone who's, really been affected by this. And
well, let's go into that now. So just for context, this is a part of the first council meeting that this council faced. And it's fair to say, speaking to some of the councillors and people around them, that public safety is a key priority of this new council. It was an emotive council meeting. Let's play 30 seconds of the end of one of the public comments that shows...
Yeah, this is from a local, his name's Eamon. And this is the end of what he had to say. But he started off in very measured tones, but it got the better of him. So that's just that component of it.
Without a more structured response, this situation could take place in any part of the city of Port Phillip. We are struggling. We dread coming home. We dread leaving home. We're fearful, desperate and exhausted. I'm totally consumed by these issues. It is affecting my work, our relationships, and we're struggling to concentrate on anything else. Please help us. I thank you for your time.
So Eamon's was not the only testimony. It was all very harrowing. And it's, these are ordinary folks who are just at wit's end, and the police and council seem powerless. So that's the context.
But the other context here, Greg, is this, there has been a group of Indigenous people camping in St Kilda for the last 40 years or so. They were used to camp in O'Donnell Gardens, where, for those who are familiar with O'Donnell Gardens, there's a little corner near the fence which has got some bricked in steel milk crates, which used to be the gathering place for these people. And they were, the local residents and local shopkeepers were not happy. They got moved on from there. They went to Cleve Gardens, where they used to gather at the toilet block that used to be in Cleve Gardens. Once again, local residents and local shopkeepers weren't happy. They got moved on from there. They got moved to the Gatwick Hotel, where local residents and local shopkeepers weren't happy, so the Gatwick got shut. More recently, I've been dealing with this for 12 years with residents I've met with residents from the Metropole apartment complex who have had people camping in their car park for much longer than 7 weeks. They've been there for years. They've been camping at the rear of the Pride Centre in the laneways behind Pelican 3 or 4 years ago. That used to be the go-through stop, and the residents and shopkeepers there weren't happy. We've seen it in laneways off Grey Street, and of course it's been up and down Fitzroy Street in various locations over the years. So this is a 30 or 40 year problem. It's not a 7-week problem. And it doesn't matter where they get moved on from, they will reappear somewhere else and become someone else's problem and become much to the annoyance of whatever shopkeepers and whatever residents happen to live in that area where they do show up. And this has been going on for 30, 40 years that I'm aware of. It's not a last 7-week problem, and we need to take that into account. This has happened in St Kilda for 30 or 40 years. So you're on mute, Marcus.
There are some differences at the moment with the increase in youth crime and perceptions of safety, particularly in our community. And that played out this week at the police forum that was held in Port Melbourne. A small but important change to the way these forums work is that now the police VicPol have taken these forums over. The council used to run them in cohort or cooperation with the Victoria Police, but now they're Victoria Police Forum. And at that forum, it was very clearly said by one of the commanders there, I'm not sure if that's the correct rank, that move-on laws have been, a local law change to include move-on laws has been requested by Victoria Police, and former councillors were briefed on that by VicPol. I don't have any recollection of that. I'll check with Andrew in a minute if he has a recollection.
None whatsoever, Marcus. I can honestly say
Andrew.
that is complete and utter bullshit if the police officer stood up and said that. So I'm happy to put that on the record. Complete and utter bullshit if he's lied to a room full of residents.
Anyway, there you have it. But I would say 80 people there, it's a problem, it's a concern. People want to see action, and they want to see action from this council. So, Greg, what are you hearing on the ground at the moment? We've been waiting for a notice of motion to come up to put those laws in place. We're not going to see it this year from this council.
No, well, what motion you're going to get next week is from Councillor Libby Buckingham, which is a motion about that full suite of services approach to trying to solve the problem. And, she works in the social justice, not-for-profit sector. And, it's very understandable that she would want to look at it that way. But as Andrew says, it's not something that hasn't been done before. But I think we do have to have a debate at council about what do you do about situations like this that go on. And there's a social response or a move-on response. I'm not sure that it's that black and white, but that's easy for me to say.
But the question then becomes, Greg, move on to where?
Yeah, that's right.
Because it's for 30 years, there's probably been, I reckon in my 12 years on council, there's probably been 20 different hotspots with the same people, and they go from area to area. So moving them from Jackson Street car park back to the rear of the Pride Centre, or back to the Metropole car park, or wherever else, even when they were down in Catani Gardens, in that little shelter at the end of Catani Gardens, we were still getting complaints from people saying they need to be moved out of there and moved on. So it's been an ongoing problem. The sand dunes at West Beach was another location where they have moved to over the years. So it's a matter of, if you're going to move them on, where do you move them on to? No one's going to say, oh, I will voluntarily have them next to my shop or next to my house. So it doesn't matter what happens. You will have someone saying, I don't want them next to me.
I think as we heard this week now is, though, that the community wants change, and this council, I think from what I'm hearing, is about to provide them that change. And this is where you'll see the change in the balance of power of the council, I suspect. I'm surprised the councillors haven't put a notice of motion up to get this process started. To change the local law is not a small thing. It requires consultation. and it will take time. And I would suspect that that notice of motion will be coming early in the new year, and I suspect it will get passed. I've personally always had significant reservations about putting laws in place that can't be enforced. I spent a couple of days on Fitzroy Street intermittently with local laws officers who are wonderful people, and they are not equipped to do policing duties. They are not armed, they are not trained, and if you put a law in place, you should make sure you have the resources to enforce it, and that's why I've, to this point, never supported it. But I suspect we're about to see a change in approach by this council, and I'm very sure in the new year they'll pass a change to the local law to
But
allow
they're also not legally
officers
protected
and Vic Pol
to
move
perform a
on.
police role. Marcus, our local laws officers are also not legally protected to perform a police role. So any expectation that our local laws can go in there and make up for any inadequacies of our local police is going to end in disappointment, because they're not going to perform that role. If we go back to the drinking ban, which the council tore itself apart over drinking bans, the police promised council they would be the ones that enforce this law, that if we passed this ban and gave them the powers to tip out and fine people for drinking in these locations, exactly these locations, that they would enforce it and they'd be the ones that would take the lead on this. And they did absolutely nothing with that, and they still continue to do absolutely nothing with those drinking bans. So,
well, and expect the similar response here.
I expect a similar outcome here, Marcus.
Greg, what are your thoughts on this one?
Through.
Oh, it's a vexing problem, and I'm not in the business of simple solutions, but I do think we have to listen to people like Eamon, whose lives have been affected, and some sort of action has to be taken. But I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I definitely think that this council will act. I'm surprised they haven't put a notice of motion up. In fact, I'm surprised there hasn't been a bit more action in the 2 meetings they have had this year. They've got a mandate of change. We've seen other councils like the City of Yarra, rather extreme, but come out of the gates. We've even said the City of Melbourne set a very clear intention of what their term is. So far, it's been very quiet council meetings, and they're very careful. They're almost treading on eggshells at the moment not to offend each other. But this issue, I think, will be the one that brings that to a head in the new year. I suspect one councillor at least will bring a notice of motion to put these laws in place to change the camping local law and also provide additional powers for move on. Is there anything down there at the moment, Greg, in terms of your reports, in terms of has the move on been successful from the car park, in terms of the car park being clear?
No, it's just moved around the corner.
They're back onto Fitzroy Street.
Yeah, so I think the car park's okay with the temporary fencing, but how long?
No, that's
so.
okay.
So last Saturday afternoon, when we had the Christmas market on Fitzroy Street, we had the encampment was moved from the car park onto Fitzroy Street outside the 7-Eleven,
Yep.
and
Okay.
it looked like part of the Fitzroy Street market, except they never had any pricing on their bicycles.
Thanks.
No, that's
Thanks, Andrew.
Well, let's move on. So we're within time. Greg, this is your last one in terms of what you want to do.
Yes,
there's
really
been some controversy at HousingFirst. So to give some context here about what we're talking about is the city of St Kilda purchased a very large number of properties over probably 40 years. Those properties were put into a trust called the Port Phillip Housing Trust under the guise of the city of Port Phillip. HousingFirst, which is now the operator of effectively the governor and operator, well, no, not the governor, but the operator manager of the Port Phillip Housing Trust assets, has come up with a controversial decision. The city of Port Phillip has 2 councillors that were directors of HousingFirst and also controlling the Port Phillip Housing Trust that made some very controversial decisions that have only been made public. Greg, tell us all about what's going on here.
Well, this is a microcosm of that bigger issue, and this has got to do with apartments in the Inkerman Oasis, which was built on a former council depot on the corner of Greaves and Inkerman Street in 2004 to great fanfare. And in fact, these buildings, they won 6 architecture awards, including a Stockholm Award from the King of Sweden, would you believe? They've won United Nations awards, architecture awards. This is a pace-setting development, which is what's called a salt and pepper social housing. So most of the houses in this development are private houses, and there's a sprinkling of social housing in it in such a way as you don't know which is which. Now, in the last 3 weeks, 2 of 3 that are being sold by HousingFirst have sold. They've sold before auction. Now, my attention was drawn to this by residents who was feeling fearful. They're social housing residents. They wondered whether they'd be next. And my interest was piqued because, you know, I'm a wheelchair user and I know it's very hard to find disability access apartments. And these apartments were very accessible and they've been sold out of the social housing stock into the private market, and they both sold before auction. So, you know, they were keen to sell them.
And what's HousingFirst had to say about this, Greg?
Well, they gave me a statement and they said, you know, they're the trustees. And what they said is, this is the one I asked about was only 1 of 4. They said this is 1 of 3 apartments currently vacant that HousingFirst plans to sell in the near term. This decision follows a detailed assessment of those assets, concluding that investing the trust's capital towards newer, more cost-effective housing options will better support our mission to provide urgently up-needed social housing in Port Phillip. Now, this building was built in 2004. They're only 20 years old. They're top of the line, award-winning standards, and they're moving out. And, you know, I would like a better explanation than that. But of course, the current council people on the HousingFirst board both lost their positions. So we have to wait to find out who to ask more questions.
So just to clarify, Peter Martin was on HousingFirst board,
and Tim Baxter.
And Tim Baxter was also, and the City of Port Phillip hasn't nominated so far. Is it in the next council meeting agenda? Does anyone know, Greg?
Yeah, there is a council nominees.
So they'll be appointing 2 new directors for those positions. And keep in mind, it was also revealed just before the end of the council term that it's been 7 years since there's been a face-to-face briefing between HousingFirst and Port Phillip's councillors. So,
okay, well, there's one more sting in the tail. This will give you an idea of how HousingFirst does its business. The agent sent a newsletter around, as agents do, saying 2 sold before auction. We've got lots more buyers. And this went to apartments in the building, including the social housing people. So that's terrified them. They're thinking that there's more buyers, more selling. There's been no communications. And we invited HousingFirst to come on tonight and they didn't respond. So, you know, I think it's time for people to step up. And Louise Crawford, the mayor, told me that her understanding was any sales of this the value would remain in Port Phillip. But I'd like to know how. You know, is it going to maintenance? Is it going to development? It's pretty sticky stuff.
Well, and Andrew and I have been proponents for a long time to increase the independent representation of Port Phillip on the Port Phillip Housing Trust Board. As we said at the moment, it's a very complicated structure. The governor of the Port Phillip Housing Trust is the City of Port Phillip, but they don't get to attend trustee meetings, etc. in terms of we don't get to appoint independent people because the directors of HousingFirst are the same people that are attending the trustee meetings also.
The same, Marcus, the same 10 people who are the directors of HousingFirst are the same 10 people that are the directors of the Port Phillip Housing Trust, which has, give or take, about $100 million worth of city.
Correct. because the trustee of the trust is Housing First, so therefore the directors make the same decision. So, but
it's the same 8 or 10 people are making. They
exactly
close
the same
one meeting,
decisions.
open the other meeting, and then approve of decisions they've potentially made in the first meeting. In the second meeting, where they're meant to be representing the interests of Housing First or the Port Phillip Housing Trust. So there's, you're talking $100 million worth of City of Port Phillip assets here, property assets. In this day and age, we probably need better governance than having the same 8 or 10 people making decisions for both organisations. In order to protect the City of Port Phillip's interest in this, there should, I've been of the view for about 10 years that there should be an independent housing trust board separate to Housing First who handle all the housing trust issues, but there was never enough support amongst councillors to actually pursue going down that path.
Well, they have the advice on how to do it because they got it in the last 6 months through a notice of motion that I put up. I've sat on the Housing First board and expressed the concerns about how this operates, and this is the potential consequence of it, that this might be the right decision, but where was the public consultation and where was the disclosure of this decision in a Port Phillip Council meeting so the public can have a knowledge and comment on ultimately what's happening with what is their assets, not Housing First assets.
And who was looking after the interests of the City of Port Phillip in that decision-making process?
Indeed. Greg?
And who cared about the tenants?
Correct.
Who communicated with them, who are feeling nervous.
So Housing First, if you're listening to us, you're more than welcome to come on and respond. We'd love to have a chat to you. But I think it's been 7 long years since the councillors have had a face-to-face briefing from Housing First, and I would hope that drought has already been broken, hopefully, or will be broken sometime in the new year.
Well, that's lots of 7 weeks, 7 years.
Absolutely. It's the number for tonight. Gentlemen, before we talk about, I wrap up with some local news. Is there anything else you'd like to mention that you've been hearing on the hustings that's going on in the City of Port Phillip at the moment?
Yeah. Next Wednesday night, there'll be a meeting at the Peanut Farm for the St Kilda City Football Club. They have received a grant from the state government to help them establish a women's football team in St Kilda. So anyone interested in playing, any women out there interested in playing football for St Kilda City, come down to the Peanut Farm, 7 p.m. next Wednesday night. They're all set to establish a new women's team thanks to a generous grant from the state government.
So Greg, what level team will that be? What level team will that be, Andrew?
I imagine they'll start in whatever the lowest level of women's football in the Southern Football League is. They won't go straight into the AFLW just yet. Give them a year or two before they get up there, Greg.
That's fantastic. So the other thing too is that we've learned that our green friends know how to do a Venn diagram, and suddenly they've got very interested in supporting a new community hub at the St Kilda Primary School. Now, of course, that's interesting because that's in both the seat of McNamara and Paran. Funny, two elections and 2 promises.
Absolutely interesting to note. So there has been the seat of Paran sits in the City of Port Phillip, the City of Melbourne, and also the City of Stonington. So St Kilda Road, the junction area, a big chunk of St Kilda East also sits in the state seat of Paran, which has been held by the Greens representative Sam Hibbins since 2014. He left the party a few weeks ago, and he also acknowledged 2 weeks ago that he was intending to resign from Parliament. We're going to ask Sam to come on the program either on the next show or hopefully the new year. So don't hold your breath, but you never know your luck. But so Sam, if you're out there listening, would love to get you on the show and hear your side of the story about what's happening. We'll run a bit of a deep dive exercise next week on what we think is going to happen with the city of the state seat of Paran. The Greens have selected their candidate. The ALP are going to sit this one out on the bench, and the Liberal Party are going through their pre-selection process over the next week or so to determine who will be the Liberal Party candidate. This could be a significant turning point for the Liberal Party at the state level, but we'll have more to say about that next week. Greg and Andrew, thanks for joining us tonight.
The ballot's on the 8th of February. So
Oh, yeah, that's right. Sorry, the
8th of
VC
February.
announced that the 8th of February is election day for the seat of Pran.
Week before the St Kilda Festival, Marcus.
There you go.
Okay, and of course, I'm a resident of Peru.
Well, there you go. You can be
My
our
St
resident
Kilda
expert.
postcode. Yes,
Gentlemen,
well,
thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. I'll hold you off there for a minute. And just before we go, just in other news around the city of Port Phillip, the new Port Melbourne Primary School location has been advised by the state government, and it's only 600 metres for the already overcrowded Port Melbourne Primary School, and that has raised some concerns. But the exact address on Williamstown Road was released some weeks ago. There has been calls by some local residents to perhaps come up with an idea to merge those two sites into the one school and have the one school controlling the two campuses. There's lots of community conversation going on about that at the moment. Also in Port Melbourne, the Station Pier building, the 1 to 7 waterfront place burnt out gymnasium has finally been demolished, almost 10 years to the day since that building burnt down. While the demolition seems to be progressed and is now finished, hopefully, controversy surrounding the 10-storey apartment block on the site, which was approved by VCAT in 2022, despite strong opposition, and locals are calling for a comprehensive regeneration to the whole area, and particularly Station Pier at the moment, because it's looking very, very sad. And as the summer months have warmed up also, we've also seen a number of incidents on Facebook of quite disturbing jet ski behaviour in Port Melbourne at the Sandridge Beach, and also along South Melbourne Beach and Albert Park Beach. Reckless jet ski behaviour across that area has been condemned by Waterside Police, and the inspector today was on 3AW saying that it was completely unacceptable. But so far, I don't understand if there's been any charges, but there has been calls on social media to follow the lead of Sydney and actually ban jet skis on the bay, which is fairly extreme. But keep in mind, it's 9 or 10 years now since a gentleman with 2 daughters was tragically killed just down in Port Melbourne by a jet ski that was moving at high speed whilst he was swimming laps in between some of the poles there. So lots happening in the city of Port Phillip. Again, we're waiting to see some action from this council. They seem to be holding a steady hand on the tiller at the moment. There's one more council meeting left for the year next Wednesday, but it looks very procedural based on the agenda that's been published. We'd love to hear your feedback here at the show. Feel free to email me, hello at marcuspearl.com. Send me a text message, hate mail, nasty calls to 0478 136 762. We'll be hitting the street next week and getting some live feedback from people. We'll have a political expert to join us and have a look what's happening on the ground in the seat of Pran, and we're looking forward to you joining us then also. Thanks to my co-hosts Andrew Bond and Greg Day, and thank you also to Flossie from St Kilda Earthcare. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you next Thursday night at 8:30.